one act of kindness, that one teacher who can change your life. First thing I would have is fun. School has to be fun. People don't do that anymore. You don't listen to music.
Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to Building Bharat. Building Bharat is not about infrastructure, big policy, or economic growth. Building Bharat here is about the small things that make big changes, small things that define us as human beings. What happens inside our classrooms and how does that impact the mindset of Bharat? हमारे क्लासरूम में जो हो रहा है वो हमारे बच्चों के माइंडसेट को कैसे इम्पैक्ट कर रहा है, उनकी सोच को कैसे इम्पैक्ट कर रहा है, उनके ग्रोइंग अप में वो क्या एक्शंस लेंगे, डिसीजंस लेंगे, उसके बारे में है. आज हमारी जो गेस्ट है स्वरूप जी, शी इज़ a brilliant example of making conscious life choices. She is a former Miss India. She is an accomplished actor and she is an educator at heart. So today we are not interviewing her or meeting her as an actor, but as somebody who took conscious life choices and made those pivots in her career with inner clarity. And today we are exploring with her how can the India of tomorrow be raised with inner clarity, consciousness, and what can parents do to build that consciousness in children, what can schools do to design for that, and this is what it will take to build the Bharat of tomorrow. Thank you, ma'am, for firstly your time for this, and we'll jump right into the questions. So in Building Bharat, basically we generally, when we talk about Building Bharat, we always talk about infrastructure, we talk about policies, we talk about everything else, but education does is like the smallest of the thing that we always think about. Building Bharat here is largely about how education can really define the India of 2040, the India of 2050, and how do we really want that to be defined in our classrooms, in our schools, and how parents today can raise children who are more conscious, who will make the Bharat of 2040. So we'll jump right into your childhood, and I would love to understand how was your family growing up, what was appreciated in your family growing up.
So I'm really lucky. I had a very mixed group of people who were taking care of me. The oldest, I guess, was my grandfather, who was, when I was born, in a garage tools business. But before that, he had a theatre company and he was a voracious reader. Every Sunday, he would go to see a film. Then there was my grandmother, who was a typical Sanatani, a Vaishnav, and a Pushti Margi. So, I mean, like, that's that limit, right? So, I grew up with her. My mother, who was a university topper and a surgical oncologist. My father, who in that time, day and age, had done his master's and was the chief producer of the Indian National Theatre. So these were the four most important people in my life. Of course, there were my Masis, who taught me some interesting things, and then of course my Kakis and my Chacha and cousins. And my Chacha was 15 years older than my dad. So my cousins were 15 years older than me, nearly, So they were more than elder brothers. There was some different type of a role. And of course, there was my brother. So this is till I was 16. And then I think at 16 and a half, 17, I met Paresh. So that changed a lot of things. But before that, so I was exposed to everything. I was exposed to the most modern India through my dad. I was introduced to caring for India and its people by my mom, who could have made lots of money being a surgical oncologist and open a lab of her own. But I remember her saying, no, I want to do something for my country, and she worked for Tata Memorial. And she saw the poorest of the poor, and the most sad, states, and she helped them. I remember such a interesting thing is that my grandmother, of course, would tell me stories from the Itihas of Ramayana and Mahabharata and all that. And she would sit and write Ram Ram in her book. And I used to say, Ba, I want to write. And she would say, okay, but you have a book of your own, because she would be writing in Gujarati and I would write in Devanagari. So I had my own book in which I wrote Ram Ram as a little kid. And it's so beautiful, this whole heritage, is that when she grew old, she gave up the idea of Seva and she got a Radha Krishan, and she willed it to me. So she told her daughters that when I die, my Radha Krishan will go to Swaroop. And my kids are so surprised at that when I say, this is my grandmother's, and she would be like 125 or something now. So, this is her Radha Krishna, and this is the Divi in which she did Diya every day, And my grandfather was somebody who you could sit and drink, first watch drinking beer and then maybe drink a beer with him, So it's just really interesting, this growing up with such diverse people.
Yeah, and very interestingly how you described your growing up. You had 4 very different personalities altogether, and everybody probably gave you a very different perspective, direction. I'm very interested to understand also that with these diverse opinions, worldviews, how was the emotional environment at home? What was appreciated? Like, was obedience appreciated, curiosity appreciated, and how did?
Yeah, so dad was a person who encouraged curiosity a lot. And I'll tell you one very interesting thing. If you visualize it, you think, wow, it's so beautiful. So I was brought up by my Nana Nani. But every Saturday, Sunday, I would be with my parents, my brother and I. So Saturday after dinner, we all got into our white pajamas and kurtas, and the room would have all the white bed sheets, and we'd all lie down in bed, all of us just lying down in bed, not necessarily in the same pose, but would listen to the records. So we'd be listening to Harry Belafonte, or would be listening to Mozart, or we would be listening to, just name the ones of that, Nancy Sinatra, and all those different, Dean Martin, and all those time, at that time. It was so wonderful because, people don't do that anymore. You don't listen to music. Of course, music is a part of your life, but you're listening to music while driving. You're listening to music while cooking. You're listening sometimes. It's not as if, okay, now this is the dedicated time to listen to music. Yeah, it's like a filler. And even I had done that in between. And suddenly I remember dad and his, music time, and I'd say, no, I think we should not do anything. We should just sit and listen to music,
So out of many of the, people in your life growing up, whom do you think understood you the most?
I think my dad. And whenever I miss anybody who's gone, he's on top of the list, because he's the one who introduced me to Picasso. He introduced me to this music. He introduced me to theatre, the love of theatre, because I would go with him to rehearsals when I was 4 and 5. Eating well, behaving yourself. I mean, not behaving as, etiquette and table manners, for example. And how do you eat with a fork and knife, or how do you eat, like my grandmother of course taught me how to eat properly with hands. And if beyond this your hands became dirty, and sometimes I would eat like that and she would go, you had to join all your hands and eat it. So yeah, but dad was the one who introduced me. He loved London and New York, so he would introduce me to, the thought of traveling to New York. And I remember I didn't want to join the Miss India. And he said, you know what, become a Miss India, you'll get to travel. And yes, I went to Western Australia for the first time on my own.
And do you think like at home there was like you said, I think your dad was making you very curious as well, and then there was somebody who was also there for obedience and discipline.
Yeah.
So was there?
So all of it was there together, but I had a very loved childhood. I don't think I wanted for anything. My Nana Nani weren't particularly very rich at that time when I was living with them. And I remember we had the car, etc. And at when I reached the 9th standard, he says, I think you're old enough to go to school by bus. So I went by public bus. So, that was another adventure. And yeah, so we were not wanting for anything. But yes, we were not definitely, very rich. The richness was already, we had a huge house because it was the house for, he had a lot of setbacks in his business, and that's what happened when, after I was born. So I kind of saw that too, and I think it kind of added to my maturity.
So I'm also very curious to understand, how were you growing up? Like, how were you as a student in school, and what were some of those experiences?
Very average student. When I became Miss India, I met my friends about 25 years after. And you know what is the first thing most of the boys said? That our classroom mouse has become Miss India. So I was so quiet. Of course, they keep telling me, now when they tease me and they say, oh, you were always so beautiful and we were always in love with you. And I say, shut up, kind of thing. And I said, you just called me a mouse. So they said, no, we meant that the quietest girl in class. So I was not very confident because my best friends, especially there were two of them, a person called Anuradha Khandelwal and Darshana Chinai. And I'm so happy to tell you I'm still in touch with Darshana, and she's still my dear friend. And three of us were in Red House, and we'd always be together. But those two girls were very clever. Darshana was like brilliant, and she became the captain, and all that. I wasn't like that. I was an average, like hardly meeting average. But I was very good at painting. And how I'm especially mentioning this because how one incident in your childhood can change things for you. So I was in the 8th, 9th standard when I won an art competition, and the governor's wife took my painting home, and she called up my principal and told him that take care of this girl, the student. One day she's going to become very great. She's going to be a great artist. So my principal came searching for me. And this is Cathedral and John Kinnon School, okay? It's not a normal school. It is like everything is just super cool about it. So you can imagine what our principal was. I don't know if he got a little later, I think, a Padma Shri, and So his name was Kuruvilla Jacob, and he came searching for me, and he would talk to me so fondly, and he'd say, "My Swarupa, you are going to do something like really good in life. How are you doing now?" And I'd say, "Okay, sir," and he'd say, "No, don't worry, you'll do well," and things like that. That was something which changed me, it gave me a lot of confidence in myself. I did not show it, but I can still remember it, and it so many years back.
This is exactly like there's an education theory around the Pygmalion effect, and it talks about how an adult's high expectations can become like a vicious cycle for a student to really do well.
I'll give you a better example than that. It is for that one teacher who you love, you can fight the world. You will even attempt the most difficult subjects. And I did really bad in science, but I wanted to do science. And he actually gave me permission, but he made me promise that I wouldn't fail. So I said, no, I promise you, sir, I won't. And I didn't. But, you know, it's just that one act of kindness, that one teacher who can change your life. And I think every student must at least have that one teacher in their school life.
You shared with us how that one incident of the governor's wife taking the painting really changed your perspective as who you are, and probably your inner self image of yourself got really pumped up because of that. Do you remember an incident or something happened that in school where you felt that up till 8th something that you were being, something happened in school because of which you felt suppressed or unseen?
Not suppressed, but something very interesting, I'll tell you. Two incidents. One was that in our school, in the 5th grade, between the 5th and the 6th, you started getting your fountain pen to write. Up till then, you're using the pencil.
Yes.
But your handwriting has to be that much good for you to be allowed a fountain pen. And I was the last kid. I still didn't get mine. And it was the summer holidays. So in my year,
The school would give the fountain pen if
no,
your
means
handwriting
you are allowed to use a fountain pen. Rather not give you a fountain pen,
the permission to.
the permission to use a fountain pen. Otherwise, you had to still make your handwriting okay using a pencil,
then
because we did the pure cursive writing. Now my handwriting, I don't know, maybe there were 2-3 others, but for me, I was the last, and it was the summer holidays because we had the Jan to December term. So we had 2 months of summer holidays in between. Guess what I did? I sat and practiced and practiced and practiced what we now teachers call overlearning. I went on practicing till I had the perfect cursive handwriting. And when I went back after the summer holidays, I showed that handwriting, and of course I was immediately given a fountain pen. But my handwriting was also displayed in the notice board as, one of the perfect handwritings, until today it is. So in the villages, when I write for my students in English, they literally beg me to write a page so that they can keep copying it and write like how I write. That was one. Another thing was in the 9th standard, I got 20% in maths. That is not good. So again came the summer holidays and 2 months of practicing. And in maths, if you know, there are only certain amount of sums you can get, right? I practiced the next exam I gave, next test I gave, I got 94%. So it was, these two remind me very much because it made me feel so ashamed of myself, and I thought, listen, I better do something about this, nobody is going to help me and I have to help myself. And this is when I understand my dyslexic and learning disabled children a lot, because these are the tendencies they have. So if they learn for themselves that they need to overlearn, they help themselves. And otherwise, teachers like us can help them overlearn. And so overlearn is not like overthinking. It's not bad. It's very good. So it just means more practice. And then you can help them get, get the marks they need to get on with life.
So what do you think, with your experience of schooling, you shared some very interesting things. Do you think schools, in your school to be precise, was it like really preparing you for exams, or was it preparing you for life?
No, not really. It was a very nice school. The atmosphere I know was full of kindness. Of course, sometimes the singing teacher would be so sick of us, and I'll never forget that sentence, and I have to share it with you. You'll just die laughing. She says, "Y'all are singing like a dying duck in the thunderstorm." So you can imagine what it meant. But yeah, so I don't know if that thing was there where they kind of preparing you for exams or preparing you for grades, or that strictness wasn't there, but there wasn't it wasn't like as if it was a fun thing. But it definitely wasn't hard on us.
So if you have to, very clearly point out or identify maybe the top 3-4 things that the school really did well, जिसके कारण आपको लगता है कि you felt and you got shaped, your thinking got shaped in the right direction.
One of the most thing is where it taught us about that one really stands out. It was like our school song, which goes Prima and Indus. And it taught you how to put your school first, your house next, and self last. So it taught you how to put self last and your country first, So I think that was very, very defining, and I still see that in a lot of my friends, because we keep meeting, even though we're all of this age. In fact, just right now on the WhatsApp, we're chatting about, like hopefully meeting up next weekend. So, so we were taught how to put our country first, which I think is fabulous. We were told to have pride in our school. So it is not school as it is in institutions, And then, of course, put yourself last. That was one thing which was very, very. Another thing was excellence. Maybe I wasn't but excellence was always encouraged. So, yeah, that. We were exposed to a lot of things, lots of sports, and we would have a boxing ring put up, and the senior boys would be boxing, and they would play rugby, and we would go swimming. We played cricket. We had our sports. We had this very nice thing. One day after school was your house day. So we had 4 houses. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that day after school, you could choose whatever sports you wanted to play. So you could play basketball, you could play handball, you could play squash. Like the swimmers would be practicing their swimming. So for 1 hour, you did that. So you learned to be with your house.
Interesting. In your career, ma'am, when you were really flourishing as an actor when you started out, and I was very intrigued, and still that question comes to, I'm sure, many people, that you made a pivot when you were like at the peak of your career, and doing something like that requires so much clarity, so much emotional stability. And I'm intrigued what growing up gave you that clarity, and what was probably going in your mind when you were making that pivot.
So for my family, education was a very important thing. Even though my grandfather was not very like college educated and all that, but he used to play hockey, and I used to play hockey when I was in school. So yeah, and my grandmother, though I think she was 4th, 5th standard. Of course, padna likhna aata tha, but I don't think. But my parents were so well educated, and for them, it was very important that you had the best. Imagine my dad filled up my form when I was 2 or 3 years old. He had decided my name in advance because he says I have to fill up this form. And he came and met me at the hospital, met mom and me, and then he says, okay, now I'm going to her school, and he filled up the form
For the school.
for my school. And the principal, and you know what the principal told him? Mr. Sampat, don't be sure you'd get it in immediately. So just imagine, he was so particular that no, my daughter and son have to go to cathedral, you know. So I think that was a very important part, and that was what I missed out when I dropped out of college when I became Miss India. The other aspect was I don't know if it was directly that, but yes, moms, being charitable and doing something for nation. And my grandmother, a lot, with her religious, stability. So I think all these things, I don't know if it was one thing, it's a combination. And I think it was a combination of all these things, And then there's another very important person in my life. Well, it wasn't she who directed me to studies. Yeah, I should talk about this person more than her first. So actually, he's a father-in-law. So he's the trustee of Jamnabai Narsi, Chhatrabhuj Bhai. And we're not directly from the same community. But I don't know why. I think he must have just loved me, and I just crazily loved him too. That I considered him a father, and he considered me a daughter. Even though there wasn't anything really overt in that relationship, like we didn't meet so much. Yes, we did, because his daughter-in-law was my best friend. And so we would meet at their home all the time. But I remember one such meeting when and I was about 32, 33, maybe 34, when he said, Swaroop, everybody does things for their family. There's no surprise in that. But what you do for society is what makes you. And I thought that's really interesting, because up till now, everybody would say, how they would go in our times is that बड़ी NGO वाली है और बड़ी charity करती है, खुद के घर में देखते नहीं है. That was the statement that used to be made in that time. कि they dress up and they go to do charity, घर का नहीं देख रहे हैं. And here's this man who's telling me कि घर का तो सब देखते हैं, तुमने society के लिए क्या किया, define you. And I thought, wow, yeah. And then I started, when the kids were in school and I was just doing this one serial, I had so much time on hand. I didn't know what to do with my day. So I went to a deaf and dumb school and tried to teach there. But since I didn't know about the deaf and dumb, and I didn't know anything about teaching, I was more like a nursemaid, which I didn't like, because I think I'm too intelligent to be a caretaker, Not that that's wrong, but I don't think I'm made for that, because I think I'm by far more intelligent. So I went to Begum Ali Awad Institute of Deaf and Dumb in the hope that I could learn something. But things didn't work out there. They were not very friendly. They did not encourage the idea. I said, "Theek hai." And around that time in Anirudh school, Anirudh Aditya school, there was an offer to learn about learning disabilities. And then I learned about learning disabilities. Now, why I'm mentioning this? Because parallelly, my children are growing up in a situation where things are not so great in society and in the country. I saw children's backs breaking because of the bags they were carrying. I saw teacher cruelty. I didn't literally see it, but you read it in the newspaper about cruel teachers and how they whack kids, and and I said, sorry, this is just not done. And me believing, that was something Dad had taught me about respecting democracy and democracy being this great thing. And I thought, okay, wow, I'm a citizen of a democratic country, and democracy doesn't mean just voting, it means doing something for you. So I changed.
बहुत. So मतलब मुझे ये हमेशा लगता है कि कुछ इस टाइप का जनरली बहुत सारे लोग फेम को चेस करते हैं एंड यू एग्जैक्टली डिड द ऑपोजिट, राइट? यू मूव्ड आउट फ्रॉम द इंडस्ट्री एंड यू वेंट इनटू द क्लासरूम, जो नहीं देखा सुना हुआ, एंड that उसके कारण exactly we wanted you to be a part of this podcast because building Bharat is not just about what should be taught in math and science, but हमारे स्कूल में ऐसा क्या हो जिसके कारण वो इनर कॉन्फिडेंस, इनर क्लैरिटी आए, वो बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट है. सो आई एम वेरी क्यूरियस अबाउट कि वो इनर कॉन्फिडेंस टू मेक सच अ बिग मूव rather than external validation.
Okay, so I'll tell you. It's very interesting. And I'm unique in this. I didn't want to be a Miss India. But at 17, I became a Miss India. At 17, I did an ad, which my face is still on the product. Okay, the Shringar ad.
Yeah.
I don't think any product has that face, the bindi.
Bindi, yes. Yeah.
It's still there. That was their first. Until the end, I'm still there. I mean, people actually buy it not with the name but with my face, and they say, this is the product we want. I didn't want to do all this. I mean, I love modeling, I love being photographed. You can see in the podcast, I'm so comfortable with the camera. The camera is my best friend. But I didn't want to do all this, and my dad kind of encouraged it. I didn't want to be an actress, but Shafi and Paresh and all made me an actress, and dad filled up the form for a film thing. I got a Yash Raj film, I got a Rishikesh Mukherjee film. But it was not my sensibility, the kind of films that were happening at that time. I think I'm born a little late. I would have been happier in the time of Guru Dutt and that time. But whatever, it doesn't matter. So I was wondering, why is God making me do all this, And then, of course, Ye Jo Is Zindagi, which made me a household name.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I was the sweetheart of everybody. Now, why did he do all that? I'm thinking because it wasn't, really. When I started teaching, I realized why all this had happened. One of it was that this girl is such a big name, she can get into anybody's office with her name. Okay? My students, who are the most vulnerable, marginalized girls in India, go back home and say, Hamari teacher to Miss India hai. You see? So, I mean, their self-esteem is up. Okay? Lots of people come to teach them. But वो खुद इतने गरीब है, तो what is the star quality? Here is this big star, she is our teacher, we've got no less. That's one thing. The other thing is, when I want to talk about policies, I want to talk about big things, I want to talk to ministers, I want to talk to education secretaries, I have to just flash my name and I can immediately meet them. So that's one great thing, right? So I think, and one more thing, I realized that in the pandemic. You see, first of all, I did use drama all my years of, I started doing drama when I was 16. Now at 67, just count how many years it is. And no teacher has that much training, to be the level I am at.
So what do you think, like you've been doing आप बहुत समय से
Another thing, the best teachers are the best storytellers, and the best storytellers are actors.
एकदम I think storytelling is वो सबसे important है classroom में अगर
There is
बच्चे
like
का
in my life skill lesson, there's one story. So those students had read the story, their teachers, and they read the story and they said, ठीक है. But she said, the minute you said it, we looked at the story totally different, because the way you may, of course my husband says, तुम कितना overacting करती हो. But I said, I'm not an actor, I'm a teacher, so I have to do all this,
Yeah, I remember the session that you took for our teachers, and even in an online setup, how interesting you could make it through your story.
And with people I didn't know. That is the thing, Like I didn't know them. With like with you, for example, it's comfortable now. I know you, I can talk to you. But they are strangers, I've never met them, and yet you could communicate. That's art for you, you know.
So today, when आप बहुत समय से ड्रामा इन एजुकेशन में आप काम कर रहे हो, बात कर रहे हो, बट a lot of schools still today don't emphasize enough on that, and I'm sure you see that, you face that. What do you think schools are missing if they're not focusing on drama, arts?
You know, arts is the best way to learn, because once you've learned it through arts, it's you know, experiential learning. Art is experiential learning, because you have to experience it to do it. You will never ever in your whole life forget it. I'll give you one example. A 5th standard kid in a village was doing a democracy and citizenship workshop with me. 10 days, and we did it. 2 years later, he was taught that in class. He goes to the teacher, and I'll tell you first in Gujarati, then I'll translate it. तो वो जाके कहता है टीचर को, वही ना जो स्वरूप बेन ने हमें 2 साल पहले सिखाया था, हमें सब कुछ याद है, ए बद्दू मने खबर छे. The teacher called me up. She says he remembers everything. Something you taught 2 years back, but he did the whole drama. So he remembers the voting rights, he remembers, you know, the Lok Sabha, the Rajya Sabha, everything he remembers because he's acted it out.
आप काफ़ी समय से स्कूल्स के साथ काम कर रहे हो, एजुकेशन स्पेस में भी बहुत काम कर रहे हो. आपको क्या लगता है कि कौन सी 2 या 3 चीज़ें हैं जो स्कूल्स को बंद करनी चाहिए करना, जिसके कारण बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो रही है आज के जो बच्चे रेज हो रहे हैं?
एक तो गलती ये हो रही है 2 चीज़ों में. एक है रोट लर्निंग एंड एक मेमोराइजेशन. रोट लर्निंग इज़ वेरी बैड. रोट लर्निंग इज़ लर्निंग विदाउट अंडरस्टैंडिंग. मेमोराइजेशन इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. जो रोट लर्निंग के हिसाब से हमने मेमोराइजेशन बंद कर दिया है. मेमोराइजेशन इज़ लर्निंग विथ अंडरस्टैंडिंग, which is very very important, and I think we Indians are super great at that. नहीं तो हमारे वेद उपनिषद हम सब भूल गए होते. तो मेमोराइजेशन इज इम्पॉर्टेंट. मेमोराइजेशन इज नॉट रोट लर्निंग, एंड नाउ उसकी वजह से, रोट लर्निंग की वजह से हम मेमोराइजेशन बंद कर रहे हैं. लाइक नहीं यार, बच्चे टेबल्स नहीं सीखेंगे. क्यों नहीं सीखेंगे? यू मस्ट नो ऑल योर टेबल्स टिल द 12th, till now, you know, 1 to 12 के tables. You have to know them. I still remember them. You have to learn spellings. You have poetry तो सीखनी पड़ेगी. If you don't learn poetry, how are you going to appreciate it? Speeches हम याद करते हैं. हम जब 3 घंटे का प्ले करते हैं, हम 3 घंटे के डायलॉग्स मेमोराइज नहीं करते हैं. वो करते ही है ना, तो वो गलत बात नहीं है. रोट लर्निंग गलत बात है. तो रोट लर्निंग बंद करना चाहिए, बट मेमोराइजेशन और बढ़ाना चाहिए.
कैन यू टेल, थोड़ा इसके बारे में और बताइए, जीवन कौशल में क्या हो सकता है?
जीवन कौशल आर लाइफ स्किल्स. ये कौशल है जो हमें रोजिंदा जिंदगी में चाहिए. इट्स लाइक नॉट टू बिल्ड अ रॉकेट. ऑफ कोर्स इट विल हेल्प, बट वी नीड इट फॉर एवरीडे प्रॉब्लम्स इन लाइफ. सिंपल थिंग्स लाइक कम्युनिकेशन. अगर मैं now today you and I are talking like this, right? अगर मैं आपके साथ ऐसे बात करती, हाँ ना सिद्धार्थ, फिर ये हुआ, और या like ये ठीक है, how would you like it? But that's what all people are doing now, right? So these are the things which is stopping communication. It's stopping your relationship building. You're forgetting about yourself. इमोशंस को मैनेज नहीं कर सकते. रेजिलियंस नहीं बढ़ रही है. सुसाइड्स बढ़ रहे हैं. सब्सटेंस अब्यूज़ बढ़ रहा है. ड्रग्स की तो बात ही मत करो. इट स्केयर्स मी व्हेन आई हियर द स्टोरीज अबाउट सब्सटेंस अब्यूज़ इन स्कूल्स. दैट्स नॉट अ प्लेस फॉर दिस. सो these where children should be playing, are they getting stuck into all this? And it's not only the rich, it's even the poor. It's even the children who are not in schools are into substance abuse. So you can imagine how bad that is. So अगर हमें हमारे बच्चे को, हमारे नेशन को बचाना है, तो जीवन कौशल तो लाना ही लाना है स्कूल्स में.
जनरली क्या होता है कि जब पेरेंट्स अपने बच्चे को स्कूल में डालते हैं तो स्कूल से अपेक्षा होती है कि स्कूल में डालने के कारण मेरा बेटा बोर्ड में अच्छा करेगा या आईआईटी में एडमिशन लेगा, अच्छे कॉलेज में जाएगा। एंड बहुत सारे स्कूल्स देखते हैं कि भाई हमें उसके तरफ रेडी करना है।
But that's not only life, no?
Yeah, so they forget to ready children for life largely.
So this is where I should tell you this about the important things. Is people think only IQ is important, intelligence quotient. Then slowly people realize नहीं EQ भी important है जो हमने सुना है. But there are others which are very important. Physical quotient. Now we are slowly learning that, and our prime ministers, introduced yoga and all that. So you realize the importance of physical quotient. A simple thing like sitting and reading or sitting in a classroom takes so much of you physically. So, physical quotient. Then we live in a society, so social quotient. But there are two which are very highly neglected. One is AQ, that is the aesthetic quotient, and the D is the dharmic quotient. Now these are what makes a healthy human being. So schools should be teaching all these things. IQ, EQ, PQ, SQ, AQ and DQ. All of them should be taught in school.
आपने एक बहुत अच्छी किताब लिखी है अराउंड लाइफ स्किल्स एंड आई थिंक बैगलेस डेज के ऊपर आपने एंड आई रिमेंबर वीव रेड इन आवर स्कूल विद द प्रिंसिपल्स, we've read some bits and pieces from the book and we actually tried and implemented it also.
It works super. You must do it more because it's all about that. Like, I'll tell you something very funny is that I come from a community which is a very conservative community, Bharatiyas. So the husbands and sons and all would go to work, the women would be at home. Now, a lot of them were not very rich. To supplement the family income, they would do embroidery, the kachi embroidery. So they would embroider saris, they would embroider batwas and blouses and all. Now that was so beautiful, that aesthetic thing. You go, India has 2,600 plus arts and crafts. No other country has this much. This will come, all this should come through schools because it has to come from a young age. It can't come older. And this 10-day bagless school concept will help that.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes a human being. You see, you go in Bombay and you see the mess it's become. The aesthetic quality of Bombay is gone. And slowly other cities too.
So, last question for today. If you were the Nayak in the movie and you had to really redesign the education system so that we have people, children who have the capability, mindset to build the Bharat of tomorrow, what are some key elements, maybe 3-4 key elements that you would have in that schooling system?
First thing I would have is fun. School has to be fun. All learning has to be fun. Because not you, me, kids, nobody can learn without fun. Because fun means you're totally de-stressed and you're learning in your 100% capability. So it has to be fun. So teachers have to be trained
To have fun.
to teach and have fun. They must even have fun. They must not, like I walk in and love, okay? Yeah. So I might as well add that. Even if I walk into my college classes, not only school classes, I walk in and say, hey guys, I love you. And the students, they go back, ma'am, we love you too. And they're ready to do the most difficult research because they love me. So, yeah, fun, love, and arts. So, there is this one very interesting thing which I think arts cannot change the world, but they can change the human being who can change the world. So, you make that person so beautiful, so sensitive, so, loving in seeing the beauty of the sunrise, seeing the beauty of the moon, seeing the beauty in the flower, the tree, that it would be difficult for you to destroy all this, you know. So you see the beauty in a relationship, you know, all these things. So yeah, so fun, love, art, and sports. And I would 100, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, a million% add the dharma. So our dharma is not just our religion, it's not our religion. It is our duty and the role that we are playing and the duty, वो जो duty हमें निभानी है और वो हम कितनी अच्छी तरह से करें, and how we realize that everything we do is not for us, but it is for our nation and we are not the person doing it, but we are doing it via some great power which you don't really need to know, but you have that much humility to understand that you are not the doer of these great things, but, and definitely, you know, the love for the country, love for Bharat. I think people should realize that, you know, we're the luckiest people to be born in this country. No other country can be what we are, but we are not giving it its due. We are not giving our civilization its due. And, you know, revive our civilization we must.
Yes, thank you. One more question I'm going to ask. You know, in the entire discussion, you talked a lot about memorization. You told us about, you know, how these are two different things, rote learning and memorization. And when we talk to teachers, parents, with AI coming into the entire gamut of education and how, you know, things are changing, how do you see education change with AI coming in?
See, AI, we have to realize that it is a tool which we have to use. We do not have to allow AI to use us. So when we start depending on AI, it's using us. But it's stopping you from thinking. And it's not necessarily giving you the right thing. I'll give you one example. I had to go for my fellowship in Worcester. Now from Worcester, I wanted to go to Bath, or I was going to go to Bath by car and I was going to return on my own. So I asked AI which is the best way to come back. You know, what are the ways I can come back and which is the one you really recommend. So the thing was, if I went by train, I would have to change 2 trains. And since I was alone, I don't think I wanted to change 2 trains, and it would be nearly more than half a day. If I went by bus, it would be a whole day because the bus stops and it's too long. If I went by cab, it would be very, very expensive and very short. And it gave me one fourth alternative, which is something which they called a shared taxi with a proper name and all that. You know, I asked everybody in England about it and it isn't there. ऐसा कुछ है नहीं. Now सोचो, नहीं, then I said, no, this is like very dicey, so I don't think I'll go to Bath. So I cancelled going to Bath because I thought returning would be very difficult. And I had very short time. So like just to go for one evening in Bath, you know, I would be spending the whole day to return and the next day I would have to come to India. So I thought better to stay in Worcester. But if I had done it, then वो तो था ही नहीं. तो क्या करती मैं? So you cannot depend on AI, yeah? You can use it as a tool to help you out, you know. But beyond that,
So education में आपके हिसाब से क्या role है AI का?
it makes things for you faster. Like I just did a class with Indian knowledge system and AI. So I said, now students, find a story from the Panchatantra on team building and tell AI to write it for you in 100 words. So they got that 100 words. I said, now write it in your own words, not in AI language. अच्छा ये तो किया, इसमें भी थोड़ा चीटिंग हुआ, तो चलो अभी ये है स्टोरी, इसका ड्रामा करो, इसका पोस्टर बनाओ, इसका पेंटिंग बनाओ. नाउ दे कुडंट डिपेंड ऑन एआई. हाउ आर दे गोइंग टू डू अ ड्रामा विद एआई? ड्रामा तो खुद करना पड़ेगा, पेंटिंग तो खुद करनी पड़ेगी. सो even if AI did the painting for you, you have to still do your painting, na? So that's what I mean. Use AI to find you the stuff, do it faster for you. But you know, and I know, when we give prompts, you always have to ask them, are you sure this is right? And it comes back saying, yeah, you're correct, it's not right. So AI बस इतना ही है. I don't think you should allow for it to take over your life. Besides, AI is so bad for the environment.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope there'll be a lot of principals, school owners who will be watching this, parents watching this, and if this conversation encourages parents to get their children listen to that half an hour of Mozart.
Or the teachers in schools think of adding all these 6, cues into the education. It would be really great.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure talking to you.